Hello, everyone. Jordan Reichert, Deputy Leader of the Animal Protection Party of Canada here. Just finished watching the animal debate, if you will. Yeah, I just wanted to talk about a few things that were covered or that weren't covered, some things that were said, and just reflect a little bit on what happened with the debate. Can everybody hear me all right? If anybody's out there, can they just say whether they can hear my voice all right or not so that I know? Otherwise, I can change my mic up. There's a few things that I wanted to talk about in regards to what happened with the debate. First of all, yes, this has come up all over the place. I wrote a blog post about it on the Animal Protection Party debate page, blog page. And so the Animal Protection Party was not invited to participate in the debate, okay? There are, people who organize debates have to decide who they're going to invite. They can invite, all the members of the elected parties, for example, or they can invite all the parties to participate. Now, most parties aren't going to respond because they don't have anything to really say about animals. So they could have had us there, but they chose not to. Okay, so just to clear that up, because I know some people had questions about that. So some things that I wanted to talk about with the debate. It was good. It was interesting. It wasn't really a debate. If any of you watched the animal justice kind of advocacy event they had a few months ago, you'll know that they had Elizabeth May, Alistair McGregor, and Nathaniel Erskine-Smith in a panel discussion, and it was effectively the same format. The questions were different and such, but there's no real debate happening. It's just, this is our parties, this is what we think. In many cases, what they talked about tonight were their personal views, not their party views. So it wasn't actually reflective of policy or platform promises that they are actually making. It's something that they're just saying personally. So Nathaniel is the only vegan on the panel or on the debate there. So he obviously spoke more to those type of issues, but it didn't necessarily reflect his party's position on things. I just want to go through a few things that stood out to me in terms of the conversation that came up and in general the debate. So first of all, the moderator at the beginning did say, this isn't all the parties were invited, but that's not the case, and I already explained why about that. There was a lot of some of the questions that being asked. The moderator did a fine job, but there wasn't really much to moderate. It basically was just ask a question, hear a response, move on to the next. There was one part where one of the questions, and it's not her fault necessarily, but one of the questions was it was about going after irresponsible breeders. And so that kind of is problematic because it creates a dichotomy for how people look at breeding of cats and dogs in general, rather than just saying, breeding animals for profit is irresponsible to society and to those animals. It was, that there's the bad breeders and that there must be some good breeders out there, which is highly problematic. That's something that really shouldn't be as a part of the narrative. Peter, is Elizabeth May a vegan? No, she's vegetarian. She said she was vegetarian during the thing. Nate is the only vegan. People say they're trying. She's been saying she's been trying for years. I think I interviewed her about 5 years ago, and she said she was trying. So that's what Jagmeet Singh said. I ran into him a couple of years ago, and he said, yeah, I'm trying to be vegan. But that's kind of just a cop-out way. It's fine for people to be trying. I'm just saying politicians will often kind of say that because if you're asking, you probably want them to be, and so that means more, right? Some things that stood out to me. Oh, first of all, I just also wanted to say, so it wasn't. Elizabeth May talks a fair bit about animal issues. Nathaniel obviously is committed to animal issues. Alistair was the odd person out here because he is the critic for the NDP, the agricultural critic, and he actually got the party, the NDP, federal NDP, to vote in favor of ag-gag legislation. So, that's pretty problematic, especially if they're calling these people kind of champions for animals or kind of putting them on that pedestal as representatives for animals, and then they're supporting ag-gag legislation. He did kind of explain why he did that. He said he wanted to kind of see what would happen, see what could come out of it. He wanted to expand it so that it would the ag legislation, mainly around biosecurity, would also affect people who worked at the farms, not just people, for example, like doing occupying farms or what have you. But again, is that kind of legislation necessary? I mean, the bigger question is, would they make that type of biosecurity legislation based on the spread of pandemics, zoonotic diseases, and not include activists? Like, just do it for employees. And why are the employees being punished and not the industries themselves, not the corporations who own these multi-million-dollar operations that kill millions of animals, hundreds of millions of animals every year. So I mean, I really didn't think he made up for that in that case, and it continued to come up throughout the discussion for those who were kind of listening closely. So I'm just going to go through and break down a few things from each of the candidates. I don't want to take up too much time on this, and I want to say that ultimately I support the general principle of what was trying to be done. I just think it lacked that sort of critical perspective to it. And I tried to bring that into the comments section. I tried to hold the politicians accountable, and I really appreciate everyone else who was in the comments also holding the candidates accountable for the policy that they were talking about, but also what they weren't talking about. So one of the things was, so Elizabeth May talked about at one point, so support, she was talking about, one of the questions was banning mink farming, and both Alistair and Elizabeth kind of talked around the issue. Elizabeth was more against ag farming, or mink farming, fur farming, but she did say she thought that there was like a humane, regulated way to continue with wild fur. So I thought that was really problematic because, and I know she was trying to couch it in protecting indigenous practices, but the fur industry as a whole is highly problematic. And, at the end of the day, the animals themselves it doesn't make a difference to them whether it is like who is killing them, or who caught them in a trap and how long they suffered. So I think, I'd love to have her explain that a little more thoroughly, but I thought that was sort of problematic. She also continued to support the rodeos, although she did speak against the worst two events, I guess, chuck wagon racing and calf roping. But there wasn't really that. But she kind of said we need to continue to support these cultural events, and so that was really disappointing because it's something that, of course, the Animal Protection Party went to and protested back in the 2019 federal election, and kind of held the Greens accountable for supporting that. So that was really disappointing that they're continuing to jockey for votes rather than take a position against animal cruelty, and support an end to subsidies for industrial ag. So yeah, when the question about ending subsidies to animal ag came up, none of them committed to that, of course. Paul Manley had previously brought forward introduced the bill to end animal ag subsidies, but then Elizabeth May saying, she definitely supported that ending animal ag subsidies in relation to industrial agriculture. So she was very careful in her wording, not to just say, animal agriculture. So there was a lot of very careful wording in this debate if you paid attention, and I'd love to actually spend the time to go back and review it. And then pet breeding also came up, and Elizabeth May also supported, didn't create that, or said she was okay with breeding of animals responsibly, which I thought was problematic. Alistair also brought up companion animals for human use, including parrots, which I thought was terrible because so many parrots are live captured and imported from out of Canada, and parrots are not pets. I don't know why he would even go there, but I thought that was really irresponsible for him to even break that up. I'm just going to look at a couple of the questions. You said, Darren, you said in a comment that if we want animal protection laws passed more quickly, we need proportional representation. Would you agree that a strategic vote for the NDP makes the most sense? on that front, NDP or Greens are the only two major parties pushing for electoral reform. Yeah. So, I mean, that was really something I wish they would have brought up in this debate, because we don't really treat it as an animal issue, but it is a significant animal issue. So, like, if you look at all the animal rights parties around the world, there's about 20 of them. Everywhere where they're successful, they have some form of proportional representation rather than first past the post. So it enables and empowers animal parties to bring these issues forward and have a strong voice in Parliament. And we know that they do have a strong voice, even with one candidate or two candidates. It can make a huge difference towards the political discourse. So would you agree the strategic vote for the NDP makes the most sense? Look, I don't think the Greens, the Greens aren't going to win any seats beyond Elizabeth May, who is a hard lock in Sydney and the Gulf Islands here on Vancouver Island, and Paul Manley, I think, will hold on to his seat. Now, when it comes to the NDP, it becomes a little more delicate and problematic. Of course, they're supporting ag legislation, so it's really hard, and they've worked with the Conservatives in the past. So, if the Conservatives gain a minority government, the NDP might very well keep them in power and work with the Conservatives on legislation that we might not think is actually very environmentally or socially or animal friendly. And I think that's a concern that I have, just seeing the way that they've sort of behaved in Parliament with the minority government. Is it better to? I really don't see. I don't think any of the party. I don't think Liberals or Conservatives are going to win a majority. I don't think the NDP are going to, come from behind and surprise everyone and get a majority. I think most likely it'll be Conservative or Liberal minority government. Would I say vote strategically for the NDP over a Liberal candidate? I would probably say no. If I had to say vote an NDP over a Conservative candidate, I would definitely say yes. But I personally, it's just such a complicated issue. You just really don't want the Conservatives to be in power, and this is the problem with our electoral system, and this is a problem with our with strategitic voting, is that if we got the Liberals, it might be better than the Conservatives, but is it really better? With the climate emergency and what we need to do with urgent policy change, I just don't see it. So honestly, at the end of the day, vote your heart. That's what we need. I don't really believe in strategic voting very much in general. So I would talk to your candidates, ask them the questions that you care about this election, and then make that decision and vote for who you think is the best candidate for whatever party, because those individual people will probably be the best representatives for you, rather than just voting on party lines. So I'm going to get back to the debate for now, but if there's any more questions, please bring them up, especially if they're related to the debate. But thanks, Darren, for the question. It's a good one. So Nate, I think Nate definitely spoke the best about animal issues, but he tried to bring his vegan perspective in, and that was great, hearing some of the discourse that he had. But it doesn't represent the Liberals, And he brought up the Animal Welfare Caucus, which he started, and tries to use that as an example, saying that they're banning toxicity testing in their platform by 2035. Like 2035, that is 14 years away. So not something that the current Liberal government is going to have any influence on, really. And I just thought the Netherlands are banning toxicity testing, I believe, by 2025. So if they can do it in 4 years, I think they only passed it last year. So if they can do it 4 or 5 years, then there's no reason we shouldn't be able to do that as well. And I don't really consider something that's 14 years away as an election promise. And I don't really see it as a significant achievement for the Animal Welfare Caucus either. So that was a bit disappointing. Let's see. I also thought that, overall the questions were okay, but there was no debate. Like it just wasn't a debate. It was, and trust me, this is how, if you've ran in politics, and if you've been a candidate, you need to understand that that's how most debates are, is they're more just somebody asks you a question and you give a response and everybody takes their turn giving a response. So in that sense, it was a debate. But anybody who was following the Facebook stream, because I couldn't post on both Facebook and Zoom, it was just too much to keep track of, is that there's so much being left out of the discussion. You know, I was able to constantly come up with things that were missing from the conversation, come up with things that needed to be said on horse slaughter, you know, or the live horse export. You know, here's something that all the parties support, everybody's happy to get behind, but where is the discussion about ending horse slaughter in Canada? So, you know, it's about 8,000 horses, I believe, that are live exported out of Canada each year. But there's about 38,000, I believe, around 30,000 horses that are slaughtered in Canada each year. And, you know, that wasn't brought up at all. I mean, what a missed opportunity for them to, I think, bring up something that's really important. And that is like really an issue that I can't believe the Liberals wouldn't do something about. You know, it's not a popular, you know, people aren't eating horse meat by the droves here, and it's not a huge economic boost, and it's not something most Canadians probably agree with. So why can't that be included in the legislation? And I understand from a strategic point of view, they probably just thought, hey, you know what, we'll just focus on this one narrow area. Maybe down the road we'll focus on something else. But that's the problem, is that we have, like right now the UN is saying it is red alert for the planet and for our global politics to take decisive action on climate heating, climate change, whatever. These parties do not have the type of policy in their platforms that meet the urgent expectations and needs of the planet, of animals, of people. You know, the exploitation of people, the exploitation of land and water, animals and the planet. These things are not going to be addressed with any of the platforms that we've seen under the mainstream parties. And this is my fundamental problem with how these types of quasi debates are framed. They're not some like great shift. They are minor changes. And you know, I wrote about this on the Animal Protection Party blog. I mentioned that earlier. But for those of you just joining, look, you know, I went through and I kind of I broke down all the parties' platforms and on animal issues and said, look, what is actually changing? What animals are actually affected? 99% of animals in Canada, probably 99.9% of animals in Canada are not affected by the legislation being proposed by the political parties. The NDP, they have almost nothing. I've mentioned animals once. The Greens have a few mentions, but have no specific section to animals, and everything is very vague and non-committal, except for trying to operationalize some of the food guide for the most part. The Liberals have almost nothing except banning export of horses. The Conservatives are focused on banning puppy mills. There's a few extra good things there, but all in all, it just doesn't make a difference in the way that, you know, animals or the environment need, and doesn't listen to the calls of advocates across the country working on these issues. So, you know, overall, it was really disappointing, and I wish so much I could have participated and brought these issues forward for all of you out there and for everyone who cares about them and who wants to see our, wants to see a real response. I mean, we're barely even talking about the environment this election. More people are talking about anti-vax nonsense than actually focusing on saving the planet, which is a disgrace. So, you know, I think that when we look at moving forward, what can we do, right? So, yeah, there's lots of problems with our politics. There's problems with calling politicians champions for animals when they really haven't done anything, or in fact, maybe they've done something against animals. You know, people calling Jagmeet Singh a champion for animals because of, you know, those websites and stuff, and then. You know, he voted in favor of ag-gag legislation. He was sled dog riding. He was wearing fur. You know, like, it's just not really there. There's no evidence of his commitment, and yet people are calling him champion for animals, right? So we need to dig a little deeper in our politics. We need to be a little more critical of our politicians. And hey, you want to be critical of me? Go for it. You want to be critical of the Animal Protection Party of Canada? Go for it. I'm critical of myself. I'm critical of the Animal Protection Party because there's so much more we need to do. But we need candidates across the country. We need people supporting. We need to make ourselves aware across the country. And when we're not invited to these things, to participate in these debates, that's how we can continue to be silenced. And that's why it's so problematic, because it's not just the animal organizations hosting these types of things or putting out surveys about the different political parties. It is the mainstream media excluding us, although they usually do offer us some basic participation, which is great. But there's just so much more that could be done. And I think if people heard our message, it would resonate. So, we're animals represented tonight in the animal debate. I think that it was a good start. I think it was, as like a general idea, I think that it's more of what we need to see in our communities. But remember, this debate has almost nothing to do with your community. This debate is not where the decisions on animals are going to be made. The decisions on whether animals are going to be an election issue, are going to be something that matters to your candidates in your riding, are going to happen on your doorstep, are going to happen, at the debates that are happening in your community. So please get involved. It doesn't matter. Like, obviously, there's not Animal Protection Party candidates across the country, but get involved politically. Bring these issues up to, if you are involved with the Greens, if you are involved with the NDP or Liberals or whoever, like, bring these issues up. Ask them why they're serving animals at their election events, okay, or at their campaign offices. Like, say, like, if we're committed to the environment, we shouldn't be serving animals or dairy or whatever at our campaign offices, at our events. If there are debates, bring these questions forward. Make it an issue. If candidates canvass and knock on your door, say, yeah, you know what, I actually care about, addressing animal agriculture. I actually care about these other things. That is where it's going to make a difference, because they have to hear this across the country. They have to hear this everywhere. Otherwise, it is going to continue to fall by the wayside. And we're doing our best to get out there, but please continue to hold the parties accountable for their policy. Don't let them off the hook easy. Don't just praise them for these meager crumbs that they throw to us in terms of really limited policy that's not going to help most animals in Canada. And keep fighting the good fight, because the real champions for animals are the volunteers, the activists, the people working the front lines, the people rescuing animals, the people giving their time and resources to sanctuaries, the people who are day in, day out living for these issues and who are committed to them. Those are the champions for animals, not politicians who just give the old one-off here and there to try to gain support. We have to hold them to a higher standard, and that's what the Animal Protection Party is here to do, is to make sure that high bar is there for them to continue to reach for in politics. And thanks to everyone. It's been a little bit. I just wanted to cover a few of those issues. Please, continue to get the word out about the Animal Protection Party of Canada. Research your candidates. If you have questions, please feel free to reach out to me anytime. I'm always happy to get in touch. It's jordan@animalprotectionparty.ca, or just message me on Facebook or Instagram or what have you. Anyway, I'll let you go for now, and remember, vote animal. Thanks. Bye-bye.